Hello, everyone. It's that time of year again. It's jumps time. The arc's done and dusted. I know there's Champions Day to come, but fundamentally, from here on in, it's a Cheltenham meeting every month, then the festival, a bit more in between, and everyone's happy. And do you know, Don? It's funny. I'll introduce everyone as and when I bring up a question to them. But Donn McClean, first of all, the judge of Irish racing,
Apparently.
as our producer has called him. Fair enough. It's funny just how much the jumps is what everyone lives and breathes. I mean, the flat stuff is great, but as far as, we'll get more interactions on this podcast than we will have done our Irish Champions weekend preview. There you go.
Yeah. No, it's definitely so here, Tom. Like you see it even at flat race meetings and national hunt race meetings. Like you compare the crowds that go to what used to be called Irish Champions Weekend, and it's still difficult not to call it Irish Champions Weekend, which is top class flat racing compared to the people that go to the Dublin Racing Festival in February. And yeah, it's just more popular. And I used to always put it down to the longevity of national hunt horses, and that's obviously a factor. But flat horses are sticking around for longer than they used to as well. Now the top ones, obviously the Arc winner, we may not see him again, and obviously the top class 3-year-old, often they head off, and the jumps horses keep coming back, so that's massive. But yeah, it's just a thing, and you see it just in the popularity stakes, and I suppose it's the season as well. Like it funnels into Cheltenham. Like even now, and in the next hour, we're going to be talking. Like Cheltenham's going to come up because you have all the different disciplines, and like it's nearly like Cheltenham is, and they call it the Olympics, and it is because it's the championship event in all the different disciplines. It's the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the 400 meters. The 400-meter hurdles, it's all the different disciplines, and then you get the best horses in each discipline at that point towards the end of the season.
Yeah, the mayor's 110-meter hurdle. There's everything. Dan Overall at Over and Clear, back after a summer sabbatical. How much do you love this time of year? This is like pig in whatever time, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't stop smiling. Like, last few weeks, it's just kind of all started to build up. Like, I've been doing my little horse to follow columns with Racing TV, and it's all starting to become a bit more real. Like, my tracker's starting to ping off the wall. Like, horses are coming out, novice handicap chases, which just I absolutely adore. Like, it's getting there. And as you say, a Cheltenham meeting every month. We're truly on the path. Forget Champions Day. This is what it's all about.
I love that you called it a path, not a road.
Well, I think that's trademarked.
Well, yes,
there would be a knock at the door.
If
I said that.
There would, yeah. Ruby and Lydia would be hammering your door down. Charlie, well, I suppose it never really stops for you jumps-wise, because you're getting the jumps horses in over the summer, right?
Yeah, as in as soon as the jump season finishes, we start all the professional trainers start reloading and buying these unraced, unbroken horses with the dream that they will then follow the road to Cheltenham and end up there as their careers progress. So we're very busy doing that during the summer. But yeah, it's still for me, it's a really exciting time of year, isn't it? The core jump season's about to get rolling, and yeah, I think for all us racing fans, it's what we've been waiting for, isn't it?
It is. So we've got one this week and we've got one next week as well. So next week, we're going to have Matt Toombs, Mr. Cheltenham himself, Declan Ricks and Steve Jones. That's going to be our horses to follow part 2 next Tuesday. I'll be contributing to that as well. I'm not contributing horses to today because I only want to do it once. And I wanted to buy myself a bit more time. And then Ed Quigley, long shot Ted, will be on this Friday. He'll be sharing his views then. He will return with us this Friday. So we split this up into sections for you. Oh, let me tell you as well, by the way, podcast-wise, we've got you absolutely covered across all of our sports. So Monday, there's a Champions League podcast. That's match day 1. Then that's already happened. Then the horses to follow pod today. NFL week 5 pod is on Wednesday. Premier League game week 8 pod is on Thursday, and then we've got a weekend racing pod on Friday. Basically, this is all because Daniel Hussey wants to prove that he's really busy, but he is, because we've got a podcast for you across different sports each and every day, and Insight's going to be very busy as well. So check all that out and like and subscribe, because that's how you can get all of those podcasts as and when you want them. Okay, we split it into sections. We've got a novice section coming up. We've got a dark horse, and then any other horses. Basically, we've just got lots of horses coming your way. So pens at the ready or trackers at the ready. We're going to start with a section we called Future Stars. They may be a bit more familiar to you. And Don's gone with a horse who looked really, really good last year. For all it didn't necessarily always work out. Take it away, Donn McClean.
Yeah, like he's a horse that you had to love at the start of the season. Like he was unbeaten in his only point-to-point. He won his 2 bumpers. Then he was unbeaten in his novice hurdles as well, straight over fences. He wasn't hugely impressed when winning at Fairyhouse on his debut last season, Jerry Colomb, but he did it nicely. Then he won at Limerick, won the Grade 1 chase at Limerick, the Faheen chase. And I suppose throughout the season we learned more about him. He went to the Scilly Isles chase at Sandown, which I thought, where he was vulnerable, over 2.5 miles on goodish ground at a park track, and he won it well. Then at Cheltenham in the Brown Advisory Chase, he was beaten a short head. It was his only defeat, and he just stayed on, just failed to catch the real whacker. And then going to Aintree, I was kind of thinking Aintree won't really suit him. He may underperform at Aintree, and then I'll back him for the Gold Cup. But then he went and won at Aintree, probably at a track that didn't really play to his strengths on good to soft ground. He's a real staying horse. To my mind, he's a real Gold Cup horse and has been for a while. And Gordon Elliott has kind of found it hard not to admit that he is a Gold Cup prospect. And look, he's up there. What is he? Second or third favourite behind last year's winner in the Gold Cup market. So he's not a dark horse or anything like it. But he's only a 7-year-old. I think there's way more to come from him. It's going to be really exciting to see where he starts off in this season. They're talking about maybe the Betfair Chase. Maybe the Down Royal race, the James Nicholson Chase here in early September or early November this year. It's kind of off in the end of October. It's just, I think, the 2nd or 3rd of November this year. So only a month away. I'm just dying to see him out. And yeah, I still think whether he's a bet or not for the Gold Cup at 7 or 8 to 1. You can argue that that's around about right, but I think he's I still think that's a wee bit big. Maybe I think he's a big Gold Cup prospect this year.
If there is a staying chase, Grade 1 chase, mid or end of season that he's made for, Dom, which is it? Do you think
the Gold Cup? Yeah, I think it's the Gold Cup because he's got class and stamina, but yet he had the pace to win a Scilly Isles chase over 2.5 miles at Sandown on good to soft ground. Like to me, that showed us an extra dimension to him, and he was so impressive in winning the Mile Made chase at Aintree as well. Again, I thought that wouldn't be a track. I didn't think Aintree would suit him that well, but he did that. Like back at Cheltenham, an extended 3.25 miles is really what he wants. Although Gordon Elliott does say he doesn't lack pace, but you need pace to be a Gold Cup horse. You obviously need stamina, but you need pace and class as well, and I think he has all of that.
Does anybody want to add anything because we know this horse so well, or ask Don anything? Feel free if you want to. Very happy to promote discussion on Jerry Colomb, but you don't have to. Anyone?
I just want Cheltenham,
go on,
Don. Are you quite happy with him round there? I mean, do you think in hindsight, if Jordan Gainford could have had that race again, he'd have won the staying chase at the festival?
Yeah, look, you get beaten a short head. I'm sure any jockey will go, if I'd have done this or done that. Yeah, he just the ground that he made up late on. But that, the Brown Advisory is 3.5 miles a furlong. The Gold Cup it's again, you have to go on again from that. And if he went so close in a Brown Advisory chase, then and you as you said, Charlie, you can argue that if the ball would hop differently, he could have won it or he would have won it. Yeah, I think the Gold Cup will see him in an even better light. He's the exact right age, 7 rising 8. Yeah, I just think he's rock solid.
And do you think, Don, obviously the real whacker did beat him that day, obviously narrowly, and you can say it was probably a bit unlucky, Jerry Colomb, but do you think he's going to be a horse as well like this season and might just go under the radar again? Because everyone believes that Jerry would have beat him, but he's a very solid horse in his own right.
He is, and he's an underrated horse and was underrated going into that race. Like he was an 8 or 10 to 1 shot. And yeah, I guess because of, he's not trained in one of the big houses that you look for Gold Cup winners, but it doesn't, like, we know Patrick Neville can train. We know that. And yeah, he just might be under the radar. And, you know, maybe there's a case of, like, unlucky losers are often overbet next time. I don't think it was the case with Jerry Colomb. I think he was a wee bit, maybe he was the kind of fashionable horse going into Aintree. I thought like he was a 16-1 or a 20-1 shot for the Gold Cup before Aintree. I was thinking he might get beaten at Aintree. He might be even bigger and be way under the radar. People will be writing him off if he gets beaten at Aintree, but then he goes and wins at Aintree, and now he's suddenly front and centre.
That is Jerry Colomb then. And we've got one more in this section, I should say. This is from Dan, a horse I didn't know anything about. I didn't remember his bumper win. So take it away.
Yeah, I think he's amongst some circles, he's become a real bit of a bandwagon horse. I think he's already been cut for the Supreme over the past month or so, just based on a bit of hype. But on paper, like, everything about him screams potential superstar. He was 160 grand as a store horse, was in the process of absolutely bolting up in his point to point when he fell at the last when trained by Elmarie Holden. Derek O'Connor rode him that day, then recommended him to JP personally, who then bought him privately and sent him to Willie Mullins. And he's a full brother to Fernie Hollow. So if races will run on paper, this horse will do an awful lot of winning. Only ran in one bumper last year, as you mentioned, Tom. That came at Naas at the end of March. So once Cheltenham was out of the way, he made his debut. Well fancied, well backed, made all. Really impressed with the way he travelled. Went from the front, as I said, and then just quickened up without having to be urged along too much. Just very gentle urging, and he quickened up quite nicely up the hill at Naas. And I think that race is pretty decent. The second is a horse called He's My Hero for Paul Nolan. I think they rate him quite highly as well. He ran very well at Punchestown on his start after that. And the third was Mahon's Way, who cost 360 grand after winning a point-to-point. So I think that's reasonably solid form as bumpers go. Looks the part. He's an absolutely stunning horse to look at. And by Westerner, you'd think, looking at his pedigree alone, like if it wasn't for Fernie Hollow, you'd say this is a horse who probably wants 2.5, maybe 3 miles in time. But he showed bags of speed in his bumper, did so in his point, and obviously Fernie Hollow has shown a lot of speed as well. He's a bit more tractable than his brother, which I think will definitely play to his strengths, and hopefully he avoids the injury issues that Fernie Hollow's had as well. But I think everything about this horse screams potential superstar. I think he's a Grade 1 novice hurdler this season. Whether it's Supreme or Ballymore, I'm not sure. Obviously, it's too early necessarily to be making any conclusions, but I'd be disappointed if this was a horse we aren't talking about as a proper Grade 1 horse going forward, and indeed this season.
Is it what you saw in the Naas bumper, or how much is your decision to put him in here influenced by what you've sort of heard about him subsequently?
I think, to be honest, it's mainly that bumper that's stuck in my mind. Like, we're getting to that part of the season where you get a few horses, they've avoided the big spring festivals, the eyes aren't necessarily on them. But I was thinking during the summer, what are the horses that kind of sprung to mind? And he was always on the top. Like, I just loved the way he travelled through that race, and I love the way he beat very decent horses in behind. Like, there was not a sweat on him, really. And I think compared to some of those who've been competing at the absolute top level in bumpers, like you look at A Dream to Share, for example, who's been to every big Grade 1 dance, I thought he might have just sneak under the radar, and he's probably got a bit more upside because he's just been so unexposed. So while he's on paper, he's very impressive, I think physically and what we've seen on the track, I think he matches up with that completely.
Okay, that is Mirazur West in the JP colours. The novices then, he is one of those, I know, but we've got a good selection of novice horses now for 23-24. By and large, they're going to be chasers, I think, but perhaps not everywhere. Charlie Poste then, step forward. Couple of horses for you.
Yeah, the novice hurdler section, I've chucked in Indivar Blur of Ollie Murphy's. He was an 80 grand 3-year-old store purchase. Ollie took his time with him. He didn't run him until the spring of his 5-year-old year. So the March of this year, he made his debut at Wetherby, and he absolutely hosed up by 12 lengths. I mean, it probably wasn't the deepest of races, but he was backed into 5-4 favourite, and he sort of cantered round. I mean, very much the vibe I was getting from the yard. He was still a work in progress, and he won as he liked by 12 lengths. And look, the race itself wasn't a great race, but the race has a history of throwing up decent performers. I think over the last 10 years, Super Sunday, Hillcrest, Chasing Fire, even for the yard the year before, had won this bumper before going on to better things. This horse is half sister Capard is a decent performer with Henry de Bromhead. I think rated in the mid 130s. And I just think this horse, he's got heaps of upside. He's got a massive amount of potential. He's by Blue Brazil, who's the sire at the moment with Constitution Hill, amongst others, on the ground. And yeah, I think this horse, the vibe I get from the yard is that he could be the real deal. Ollie's had a heap of big winners and decent winners as well, but probably looking for one of these young horses to really translate and hit the big time and be a proper graded performer. And I'd say this lad has the credentials to do so.
And you've got a novice chaser who ran in the Supreme.
Yeah, novice chaser, a little bit more household name. Tamaras, you know, he I think he won a bumper on his second start for Paul the season before last, and then started last year off really well, winning his first 3 starts, including the Tolworth at Sandown. He was very impressive that day on slow ground. Maybe again, you could argue it wasn't the deepest grade one, and I suppose subsequent events showed that to be. He was put firmly in his place at Cheltenham and Aintree, but I don't know, you kind of got the vibe we weren't seeing the best of him. He looked like a real frame of a horse, and I mean, I kind of hate the cliche, but he looked like he was ready made and born to jump a fence. But I do think with this horse, he does look the obvious type to improve significantly now he goes chasing. And like I say, we're talking about a horse that is already a grade 1 winning novice hurdler. So he's a stack of ability. Whether as he goes through his novice chase campaign, he might come up short in the spring against the Irish battalions, but you'd have thought the grade ones at Sandown, the Henry VIII and the Ciliars would be really obvious targets for this horse if he at least just even translates his hurdling ability over. I mean, I'm not sure he'd need to really significantly improve to be a major player in those grade ones, but I do think this horse has upside, and you know, he's already a horse rated in the high 130s, a novice hurdler. So yeah, Tamaraz for me is a novice chaser.
It's an interesting point you raise, because my racing TV horse to follow, and one I'll put up next week is Hermes Allen, who's going to go chasing, same stable. But whether or not he's going to win at the festival, I'm not sure. But those two are just the type of horse I can see winning top level races over their respective trips, even though they might come up short against the Irish. It's just, how do you, this is an open question for everyone, but when you had the by and large British novice hurdlers getting absolutely hammered by the Irish, can we see them over fences being able to level up the gap, do we think, or not?
Not particularly. I'd say they're just more domestic horses will win the grade 1. Luckily, we have so many grade 1s over here. They're probably going to have their chances. I think when it comes to Cheltenham and the likes, they're not necessarily going to be top of the radar. And I think the anti-post betting bores it out.
I could see Don sort of sitting there waiting to but he was hoping a British person would jump in first, you know, and say what he was thinking. But yeah, I think that is correct. I mean, there's such an abundance of Irish talent. It's almost hard to pick between them. So I sort of played safe and just went with a British horse that I think is an obvious one, as you say, to mop up some very decent prizes over here before probably, in all likelihood, coming up short once we get to Cheltenham, Tom, if I'm honest.
Yeah, the British won one of the novice chases, only just from Jerry Colomb this year, but yeah. I agree. There you are. Good Land is going up in a couple of places. Now, one of you's got 2 in here, so I'll stick with the person that's got 1. So, Dan, Just Good Land for you. Take it away.
Yeah, so I've only had 2 Cheltenham anti-post bets so far. He was the second one. I backed him for the Turners, luckily before the Impere Pass news came out. So very happy when I heard that. But I think this is a horse going to be very, very good over a fence. In last season, he was coming back from basically a 2-year break. So he not really had a good run of things, but everything he did last season I thought was very impressive. Won his bumper. I thought he looked very impressive when he won his maiden hurdle over Christmas time. That produces a lot of winners typically. And then went straight to Nathaniel Lacey at Dublin Racing Festival after just that one win in a maiden. You can't call that a vintage grade 1, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. Sander Clegane was back in Fern. I think he's a very good horse in his own right as well. But I think Goodland, everything he did that day, 2 mile 6, still relatively inexperienced. He travelled extremely well, quick into the front quite early. And I don't think he was doing a whole lot in front. So I actually think he won that with a bit more to spare. and then went to the Ballymore when I was, to be honest, crying out for him to go to the Bartlett because I'd backed him for that. But they went to the Ballymore because I think this is a horse with plenty of speed, and I thought he ran a really respectable race that day in a deep-looking renewal. I'd say Impere Pass was out in front. I mean, nothing was getting close to him that day, and who knows where he'll kind of rank in the hurling division this year if they do indeed stick to that plan. Gaelic Warrior, obviously, back in second. I mean, he's probably the idea of a lot of people. Stayers Hurdle winner in waiting. And Champ Kylie in his own right is a very good horse, Grade 1 winner, and looks a very useful chasing prospect in his own rights. There's no disgrace in finishing fourth to those. And that looks even more impressive when you find out that he actually had a virus during that race, and his blood work after the race was not good at all. So he's given the rest of the season off. And Michael O'Sullivan gave an interview and actually said he thinks this horse can be better than Marine Nationale, which, given he won the Supreme from Facile Vega, is a strong endorsement indeed. And now we know Barry Connell's got the ammunition to train Cheltenham winners. I just really like everything about him. Like, he's extremely uncomplicated. He's made his own running in the past and had no problem with that, which I think is important when it going into novice chasing to be able to do that. It can help avoid a lot of trouble in behind. He travels well. He can sit in behind as well as he did in the Ballymore, travelled sweetly through that race to a point. I just think this is a horse ready-made for fences. He seems to have more speed than I initially gave him credit for, so I think the 2.5 mile route is where they'll go. And they've said the Drinmore is the early season target. So if all goes well, I can see him being right at the top of the market for the Turners come March.
Okay, good stuff. What do you want to add to Good Land, Don? No chance he turns out a better horse than Marine Nationale, surely.
I think they're different types of horses, I'd say, Tom. I'd say Good Land is more of a stayer, and Marine Nationale would be more kind of a 2 mile chaser. And it's so exciting. Looking forward to seeing him over a fence. But on Good Land, yeah, echo a lot of what Dan said. Like, he wasn't right at Cheltenham, and he still ran very, very well. Like, he's a chaser in making. I did a piece with Michael O'Sullivan for the Racing TV magazine, and like, he's a very understated lad. Like, he's a very, very, very good rider, which I think that's a big asset for Good Land and for Marine Nationale this season. And he just seemed to just said Good Land. He's just looking forward to him going over fences quite a lot. I think he might be more of a stayer, though. I'd say Turners maybe, but more likely the Brown Advisory Chase. I'd say, Dan, he might be stepping up further in trip at the Nathaniel Lacey hurdle. It's a 2 mile 6 hurdle for novices, and it's a staying race. It's normally the stepping stone for the Albert Bartlett. Now, as you said, he didn't go for the Albert Bartlett. He went for the Ballymore instead. So he does have pace. So it's just going to be really interesting to see what route he goes. The Drinmore, it's a 2.5 mile novices chase, but it's very early in the season, and it's very unusual for Drinmore horses to come back in trip. They'll either stay at that trip or go up in trip. They'll be kind of staying chasers. Usually are the types of horses who run the Drinmore. So I'd say maybe somewhere between 2.5 and 3 miles is where Good Land will end, whereas Marine Nationale, obviously Supreme Novices hurdle winner, I'd say it'd be more over the shorter trips. But yeah, Good Land is I'm with Dan on him. Yeah.
And another novice chaser, Don?
Yeah, Sander Clegane. I think he might be more of a staying type, like either Brown Advisory or National Hunt Chase. But like Paul Nolan, he's a very, very good trainer, and he always held him in high regard. He finished third in that Nathaniel Lacey. He was only 4 lengths behind Good Land. And then he ran in the Albert Bartlett, and he did remarkably well to finish third. He was only beaten a length by Stay Away Faye. He was out the back early on. He kind of got hampered. He was out the back and wide. You think you're unlucky to get hampered if you're wide out the back, but he was early on. And Stay Away Faye, I think Stay Away Faye made all the running, and he came from a long way back and stayed on himself, and Affordale Fury stayed on to finish second and third. And then he came to Punchestown, dropped down and tripped 2.5 miles and won the Red Mills final. It's a really valuable hurdle race, which again, Sean O'Keefe rode him, got him out in front, and made use of his stamina. I think he's going over fences now. Just Paul Nolan was saying that he's going to make his debut soon over fences. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him a lot. He's a real staying horse. He'll be a horse for the soft ground novice chases during the season here. And then, he's got on to Cheltenham, where maybe it'll be, maybe the National Hunt Chase will be the race for him. Maybe we'll see how the season goes, but he is a horse who stays really well.
That's Sandor Clegane. I was with him a few times last year. That's our novices done. We move on to our dark horses. Now, most of these are going to be pretty left field. We've also got an any other horses section as well, who are very left field. So dark horses, first of all. Charlie Poste, your dark horse is?
Etalon from the Dan Skelton yard. Horse, he's rated 120. He had a productive enough first season over hurdles. He was placed on every start, winning at Wetherby. He's actually second at Aintree in, I think it was December, to strong leader of Ollie Murphy's, who again had a very, very good novice season, and I think is remaining over hurdles. But it's going to be quite interesting to see where he ranks in open company. I think a horse with plenty of upside still. But yeah, Etalon finished this season finishing 4th in the EBF final, first time tongue strap on, and ground was very heavy that day, and he just flattened out and kept galloping. I mean, I think it was a pretty solid run, but he just looks like he's a horse with plenty of size and scope. I spoke to a few people in the yard that he's been sort of waiting time to go chasing, and he will do now. He's actually entered at Hexham on Friday in a 2-mile novice handicap chase, and it might be an interesting starting point for him for that. I mean, nice fair track, and again, I think he's a sort of horse with enough stamina to go up in trip. I definitely see him over 2.5 miles, but he is inclined to race a little bit freely. So the fact that he's starting off over 2 mile, I see as a positive, and he's a horse that, look, whether he's going to end up being, an above average or very good horse, I would say possibly not, but there's a huge amount of scope for him off his mark of 120 to have plenty of upside.
Okay, good stuff. Charlie, your clock is slow.
My clock is slow.
Yes, your clock. Yes, your clock. Yes.
Oh, behind me. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I think it's just stopped. It's just stopped.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Yeah. You're a couple of minutes. That's all right.
Even a broken clock's right twice a day, Charlie, which might seem quite appropriate.
Yeah, I like that. You know what? I think maybe it's my wife, who is notoriously late, maybe has done this deliberately. Potentially.
She's like, I'm not late. What are you talking about? Look. There you go.
I'm actually early. Yeah.
We'll have it fixed. Don't worry. We'll get it fixed. I know that's what everyone watching on at home was thinking. Donn McClean, your dark horse.
Lantry Lady. Yeah. She's only run once, but the impression she gave that day at Goran Park, Rachel Blackmore rode her, Henry Rumhead's filly or mare. Well, she's 5. She rode it with an awful lot of confidence. She won really impressively. There were 2 other 2-mile hurdles run on the day, both maiden hurdles, 2 divisions of a maiden hurdle, and the time was way faster than both, and she won really impressively. So just looking forward to seeing where she's going to go next. That was in March. It was a racecourse debut. She's out of a half-sister to Annie Power, so really well-bred mare by Sanderson. And I think she won in March, so I think she's a novice until the Hatton's Grace hurdle meeting at Ferry House. She's a novice here until then, so she can run a novice race until then, and then she's into open company. But yeah, she just look. It's hard to know how good she's going to be, but she's got everything so far. Everything is a positive. The performance she put up, the way she was ridden, the vibe about her beforehand, her breeding, and the ease with which she did it and the time she clocked. So yeah, I think there are lots of positives about her, and just one to keep in mind for wherever she goes now. Okay, and Dan, your dark horse.
Yeah, another Dan Skelton horse. That's Low de Sud, who again I think is going to go novice chasing, a bit like Etalon. Was a listed winner in France over hurdles, and that earned him a UK equivalent rating 145 before he moved over to Dan Skelton. Made his British debut in a 2-mile free handicap at Haydock. He was quite weak in the market that day, drifted alarmingly from 11 to 10 to 3 to 1, travelled really well into the race, just faded late on, understandable, on his first start in the Britain over in Haydock on soft ground over that kind of trip. Then went to Kempton, was a very good third in a race that's produced the county hurdle winner in Favois and the Martin Pipe runner-up in No Ordinary Joe. And he was third in the Moor Battle, which is traditionally a very strong handicap. I think all of last season, he was just kind of giving the impression that he wasn't the finished article yet, and he would improve immensely for a bit of time. He was only 4 when he started the season with Dan Skelton, still only a 5-year-old. And I think he's been quite smart in giving him just a few races, not overly exposing him at all. And I think Dan's done that with a few. Last season in particular, Etalon, I think definitely falls into that bracket as well. I think chasing has definitely been the plan for a while, ever since they've had him. And he looks a classy sort. He's only rated 131 now. I'd be amazed if he can't win novice handicap off that, if they go down that route. But I think given the general lack of depth there is in the 2-mile novice chase division in Britain, I think he could actually make up into a graded novice chaser at that level. I think there's a lot of upside for him, and I'd be disappointed if he isn't winning at least a couple of races this season.
Thanks to the suggestions we've had in, by the way. Liam says Walk Away Harry for Charles Burns is his dark horse. Form lines with Ballyburnham. Fact to File. Same route as Blazing Carl, I guess. Albert Bartlett, Here We Come. Didn't work out ideally. But that's Liam's dark horse. Good luck with that, Liam. Any others, do let us know. We move on to any other horses. Then we've got a question section at the end where we've got a few questions for the team. I'm going to come straight back at you, Don. You can run through all of yours, so you can take the floor. 4 other horses for the folks out there to follow for 23-24.
All right, we'll be quick with these. There are 4 of them. Magical is always the first. She's not really a dark horse, but I think she could have a big season this season. She, in the Mares Novices Hurdle at Cheltenham last season, she didn't have the run of the race at all. She was well back in the field. Again, it was another race in which the winner made all the running. You wear it well. And she was well back early on. She kind of stumbled on landing over the second last. She was hampered at the last. She stayed on well towards the far side, probably not on the best of the ground. And she still finished second in the end. So it was a massive run. She'd been impressive in winning the Grade 3 Novices Hurdle, the Mares Novices Hurdle at the big Down Royal meeting coming up. She was disappointing at Fairyhouse, but her record now suggests that maybe she needs to be fresh. So given a break after that, she came back at Goran Park the other day and was really impressive in winning a Mares listed race. I think she could be one for the Mares Hurdle, all going well, please God. But I mean, I know it's a long way away and there's plenty to happen between now and then. But she stayed the extended 2 miles of the Mares Novices Hurdle really well. And while she was beaten over 2.5 the last day, I think there's every chance she can get 2.5 this year as an older mare. She's only 5 rising 6. And she just underperformed at Fairyhouse. I don't think it was a lack of stamina that did her in the end, or it was inconclusive because she didn't look like the likely winner from a long way out. So, and the fact that she's got good form at Cheltenham, that's obviously a positive going back there. Captain Conby of Dusty Sheehy's, he was a good handicap hurdler last season. He finished 6th in the Coral Cup. Again, kept on well. On his debut this season, he won on his chasing bow at Killarney. He won really impressively. And he was beaten the other day behind Sharjah in the Grade 3 novices chase there. But look, Sharjah, he could be, I mean, I know he's 10 rising 11, but he's a top class horse. And Captain Conby was kind of taken out of his comfort zone when Sharjah put in an injection of pace down the back straight, and his jumping kind of suffered as a result. I thought he did well to keep on to take second place from Watch House Cross. That was 2.5 miles. He might be a horse who can do better over even further. He's a good jumper. He jumped well. He won his beginner's chase over 2 miles in a furlong, but still think that maybe a test of stamina will be the thing for him. Comfort Zone was obviously a high-class novice hurdler last season. He didn't run again after he won the finesse hurdle at Cheltenham at the January meeting, and that was after he'd won the finale hurdle at Chepstow at their Welsh National meeting. He ran on the flat there at Leopardstown on Irish Champions Weekend in the Patingo handicap, the 1.5 mile handicap on the first day of the festival, and he did really well. He was kind of on the inside. He was a wee bit shorter room, and he had to be taken out early in the home straight, and he finished off his race well to finish second behind Saturn. Jessica Harrington's filly is a good filly. So back over hurdles, he's got a hurdles mark of 132. He raced in that Leopardstown race off a flat mark of 86. So he could be a really well handicapped horse now. He's very likely raced. He's only 4. He was up there. Like, we never got to test him in a Triumph hurdle or in a champion 4-year-old hurdle at Punchestown. But his 2 wins at Chepstow and Cheltenham, they were Grade 2 races. He was up there among the top 4-year-olds last season, and he could be a well handicapped horse over hurdles. And I just want to mention Redstone as well. This is kind of recency bias. He won yesterday at Fairyhouse, but Gavin Cromwell, his trainer, just seemed to think an awful lot of him. He fell in his point-to-point when he was probably going to win at Old Town, his only point-to-point. He was trained then by Ian Donoghue, who's the brother of Keith Donoghue. And Keith Donoghue obviously has got a big connection with Gavin Cromwell's yard. And he rode him yesterday, and he said that he knew him really well from having been with his brother. And the way that he did it yesterday, he just stalked King of Kingsfield into the race. Gordon Elliott's horse, he was an odds-on shot. And King of Kingsfield ran well and jumped well in front. And King of Kingsfield finished 3rd in the champion bumper at Punchestown last season behind A Dream to Share. So he brought a high level of form into the race. But Redstone just quickened past him. The pair of them pulled miles clear of their rivals, and he only won by a half a length, Redstone, but it looked like he had a good bit more in hand than that. So he's just one maybe to keep an eye on. I think the inside track at Fairyhouse wouldn't have suited him really. He's a big, strong, galloping horse. I think a more galloping track and even softer ground will suit him better. So he's, maybe he'll be better over fences in time, but yeah, I think even over hurdles this season, he's one to keep in mind.
All right, hope you're making a note of all of those. There will be an insights column up afterwards, so don't worry, they will all be down for you there. Trevor says, guys, you're missing the obvious Dan Skelton dark horse. Up in trip, Itac Blue. Maybe you want to make a note of that. You're nodding, Dan.
Yeah, on my another cheap plug, producer Dan. Sorry, but my winless wants to watch column. He's actually on there. I've got 3 Dan Skelton horses on that list. Lodeside's one of them. In Itac Blue is the other, and Ho Jolly Smokes the third. So yeah, I agree with Trevor there.
Do you have a ones to watch column?
Yeah, it's a winless ones to watch, and no horse that won last season. So 20 horses, 0 wins between them, all of last year.
And where's that?
All on racingtv.com.
Lovely. Excellent. Dan's going to absolutely love this plugin.
Absolutely.
Good. There are other TV channels available, he says. Are there? So they've got a winless ones to watch column, Hussey. Charlie. Other horses.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, I can definitely see the Itac Blue advert, and Dan chucked him in a listed race midway through February, I'd imagine, thinking that if he didn't win, he was going to keep him as a novice for this time round. So yeah, just an interesting horse. For me, I've chucked 3 horses up. I did it last year, a few horses that we'd sold from the yard. So first one, Boy La Vie, ended up with Jimmy Moffat. He won a bumper first time out for the yard in Newcastle. Races actually worked out okay, and he won very, very cozily. I spoke to Jimmy actually a couple of days ago. He's really pleased with the horse. He's going to wait for some slow ground in November and start him off over 2 miles over hurdles. But horse with a big engine, and yeah, it'd be no surprise to see him do very well, especially up in the north of England. So Boy La Vie, the first one. Second one on the list was, I think, Pragnell. Yeah, he came to us in July last year, literally out the field, and so the difference there is he had no real sales prep, which makes a massive difference to these young horses. So he was quite a feral character when he arrived in the yard, and he did really well. He won first time out in a point-to-point, first weekend in March up north. He's gone to Charlie Longsdon, and I'd just be surprised if there isn't a massive amount of improvement in this horse. It's by Diamond Boy, who's become all the rage with Impare Pass and Long Press, and amongst others. And he's a really big, powerful horse that I could see doing very well. Might be a sort for a bumper first time out. I think we had a touch with Mount Benetti last year doing similar. And then the third one is a horse called Royal Infantry, who won his point-to-point at the second time of asking, a Soldier of Fortune horse. Just mentally never really switched on last year. We thought he'd win first time out, and he was just too babyish. And again, he got himself into a losing position on his second start, and then sort of suddenly things clicked in from the back of the last, and he was impressive from there to the line to win narrowly. He's gone into training with Dan Skelton, which is a yard that we've been very lucky with previously, with Third Time Lucky and Rock House recently, who again, I think might have a bit of a squeak in the Persian War at Chepstow in a couple of weeks' time. So Royal Infantry would be an interesting one to see at a yard that's done very well for us in the past.
Does it always work out with these horses who you want to follow, Charlie? Or obviously without naming any names, sometimes can the yard that they go to just really, cock up all your hard work, if you like, and you think that's not what you should have done with it?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I do think there's an element at times, Tom, because you're playing devil's advocate there a little bit, which I like. But sometimes I think maybe they just end up in the wrong routine. So certain horses fit certain trainers better than others, I think, and sometimes they don't get a lot of luck in life, maybe injured or whatever. And yeah, maybe sometimes trainers might make a different decision to the one you do. But I mean, one that's an obvious one for us that's on a comeback trail is a horse called Salt Rock that went to Kim Bailey. He was an expensive horse. I mean, all the vibe I got from Kim and Dave Bass was that they loved him. He went off 5-4 favourite in a Warwick bumper. And being honest, as a consigner and a seller, it was one of those where I literally wanted the ground to swallow me up and hide because he didn't hardly beat the ambulance, you know, as in, so you're hoping that there was some things come to light, and you know, Kim's were going for a bit of a lull at that stage, and you hope a horse like him is going to bounce back and show what we saw him when he won his point to point and what they're obviously seeing at home. So no, the answer is it doesn't always work out. The ones that you think or I think are going to be good always end up that way. But yeah, those are three from the sort of last year's crop that I'd be very hopeful for moving into this winter.
And you gave us a good couple last year who went out to win a good few races. Alex says Elefante beats that lot, including Jerry Colomb. Thanks, Alex. She is a novice hurdler, but and she won recently. Alex, ever present on the podcast. Thanks for your contribution. It's just you, Dan, isn't it? 4 for you. Take it away.
Yeah, 4. I'll skip over Etalon because Charlie's already mentioned him. But yeah, I think he's custom made to win a novice handicap chase off a mark 120. I think Charlie's already covered him in detail. The first one as well is Foxy Girl, currently rated 123. I think she'll be much better than that. Second on a debut in Ireland, coming off a 600-day break, conceded experience and fitness to Liberty Dance, who won a listed race next time out. The third, who was several lengths back, is now rated 123, so paints that form in good light. She then beat In Excess of Willie Mullins in a maiden hurdle, who then bolted up next time out. And then she was favourite for the Mares Handicap Hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival, which normally is a very strong race and produces plenty of winners. But she skipped that entirely. I'm not sure whether that was intentional or she had an issue, but she went straight to the Mares Novice Hurdle at Cheltenham. She was the choice of Rachel Blackmore, despite inexperience, despite them having, I think, 5 in the race. She then went off the shortest price of those. She was quite well backed on the day. She was still a bit too keen. She pulled away through the field early on, still put in a very decent display to finish reasonably close up, only 12 lengths down at the finish. But I think she's better than that. She's still clearly a filly with a lot of talent, and they must think a lot of her if she was the choice of those 5, considering they all had decent chances that day. Still only on a mark 123. Like, that looks very exploitable to me, and I'd be very hard to oppose her in a handicap off that. And I think she'll probably actually settle. She'll be a graded level filly. Etalon we've skipped. Then onto Immortal, who is only rated 110 for Nicky Henderson. Only 2 starts over hurdles last season. That was his only racecourse experience. Finished second to a couple of Gary Moore horses on both occasions, Authorized Speed and Nigga Vega, who I think are both very decent in their own right. On the first of those starts, the horse in third, who I think was 13 lengths behind Immortal, is now rated 111. So given Immortal was rated 110, if you take that literally, it looks very, very well in. I spoke to Nicky actually about this horse, and he described them as a lovely, big, beautiful moving grey. It was a bit weak last year, and hopefully with a full campaign, he can go a long way over hurdles, and he will be very, very exciting when he goes over a fence in a year or so's time. So they clearly love him, and rated 110, he could be a bit of a handicap snip. And the final one, a horse called Lookaway. If you remember, won the Aintree Bumper a couple of seasons ago. Neil King described him as the best horse he's ever trained, potentially. Obviously, a very strong indictment. They thought the world of him. But last season for the yard was just a complete nightmare. And their lowest number of winners since 2007, lowest strike rate since 2009. Everything just kind of went wrong. I think they had 10 winners in total, and 4 of them came during the early summer months. So those winter months for them were just completely scarce of winners. And there was still promise in what Lookaway showed over hurdles. Made an encouraging debut of a 2-mile 5 when too keen, and just faded out a bit late on, but just didn't kick on. But I think you can't really hold that against him just based on how the yard performed as a whole. I think once the yard started to turn a corner, when she got to those early summer months, he had a couple of confidence-boosting runs, beat a couple of decent enough horses on his first occasion, then bolted up again after that in fairly modest affairs. But I think it would have been good to give him some confidence. He does still remain a novice over this season over hurdles, which will be a benefit. They could campaign him in any number of ways from here, but he's rated 122. I think they'd be amazed if he isn't way better than that. He beat Collector's Item in a point-to-point, who's rated 132 now for John Joe O'Neill. I think over 2 mile 4 will be his trip. He could be a handicap hurdler. He could even go in graded novice hurdles this season, or he could go over fences. Like, the world is his oyster. And I'd say there's got to be a good few races in him because the yard absolutely love him.
Jake says Foxy Girl was slightly lame before the Dublin Racing Festival, unfortunately.
There you go.
There you go. We move on to some questions. How many anti-post bets have you had? And what are the ones you are interested in at the current prices? Anyone had any Cheltenham anti-post or anywhere else anti-post? No.
I've had 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I backed Garner Marceau for the Mares Hurdle about a week after Cheltenham, but she was 25s back then, and she's now 10s because she won in France over 2 mile 4. And I booked Goodland for the Turners. Those are my 2.
Okay. Don, nothing yet?
No, I nearly backed Jerry Kalam after he got beaten in the Brown Advisory. It was a 20-1 shot for the Gold Cup then. I just thought 12 months, it's too, I need to wait till October or November. So I didn't. I left him be.
Half the price. Good stuff. Can anything serve it up to Constitution Hill this year? No. Do we know who the best? Do we know who is staying over hurdles? Who's the best novice hurdler staying hurdling at this stage? Do we know?
Imperi Pass.
Okay.
Definitely.
And can he?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on against State Man if they clash early on in the season, because State Man in his defence is very, very good and very consistent. So if they end up clash, but they could be kept apart until March if they're campaigned in any number of ways. So we may not see them take each other on until March, if potentially. But look, he's very, very good in Perret Pass. But I think they're going to go chaser with him next year. I'd say that's almost a certainty, all things being well. So whether they give him an overly hard campaign this year, time will tell. But look, he's very, very good. I think in a world he can beat State Man, but can he beat Constitution Hill? I think the market and the general impression would be that he can't.
If Constitution Hill if he's the kind of night nurse, sea pigeon, Monksfield type horse that comes along once every 20 or 30 years, then Imperial Pass will have to obviously get up to that level. Now, I agree with Dan. He's a very, very exciting horse. He improved all last season. His Cheltenham win was brilliant. His Punchestown win was really good at the end of a season, and I think he's got the potential to improve to be better than Stateman. And you never know. Willie Mullins, he lets them take each other on. They could all run the Morgiana hurdle, so we might learn quite quickly where the pecking order is. But yeah, I agree with that. I think if there's one horse who can get up to his level, it's Imperial Pass.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I mean, I think Willie Mullins is a competitor, and I think he kind of liked the idea of maybe having something that could serve it up to Constitution Hill. And probably what you're seeing is that of the ones he has, he thinks he is the one that maybe could bridge the gap. But it's at the same time, it's a big bridge to make, isn't it? I mean, the level Constitution Hill is at, and in fairness to the horse, is massive. But yeah, I do think I think it's exciting that they're both going to be having a go at it, in Perret Pass and him. I think it could be very interesting.
Okay, just looking in, Perret Pass has, I think, an official rating £7 a fine with State Man, but obviously he's just stepping into open company now, so we'll see how that goes. Trevor says, guys, which French horse coming over interests you most? The only one who I know that the yard think an absolute world of is it Il est Français? Is that what he's called? The Noel George horse.
Yeah, he was winning in Grade 1s in France last season. Yeah.
They think that's a very smart horse. Whether or not he can translate that to cutting with the best over here, I'm not certain. But that's the one obvious one who I'm looking forward to seeing over here. Anyone else?
Paul Nicholls has a horse they seem pretty keen on, who came over last year, but they gave him the season off. Irandando has. He seems to be pretty highly regarded by the yard. If he'll go novice hurdling this year, giving him plenty of time. They seem to rate him quite highly. It's hard to know, isn't it, really, without an extreme in-depth level of French knowledge. And obviously, a lot of these horses will improve, and Willie Mullins will have about 30. So there's plenty of them, but I generally wait to see them over here before getting too stuck in.
Okay. Question I wanted to ask, maybe to you, Don. Can Gordon Elliott close the gap to Willie Mullins, or are they just further apart than they were half a decade ago?
Well, on last year's evidence, they are. Gordon Elliott, he's so unlucky because he's just unlucky to hit the Willie Mullins era, because he's miles clear of everybody else. But Willie Mullins is just so far in front, and he's going further in front. Like even at Cheltenham last year, Gordon Elliott had 3 winners, 6 seconds, and 5 thirds, which is a hell of a Cheltenham Festival return. Willie Mullins had 6 winners, 7 seconds, and 8 thirds. So it's not just winners, and he's scraping by having winners, and they're getting the prize money for him. There's a depth to the Willie Mullins performance, and like Gordon Elliott has done brilliantly and is a brilliant trainer, but it's hard. Like it's the gap with last year was over 3 million last year, which is a colossal gap. I remember when they went into the Punchestown Festival, it was the year that Album Photo ran out. And when Album Photo ran out, it was Gordon Elliott was in front going into Punchestown Festival at the final week. When Album Photo ran out, I think Gordon Elliott had the first and second, or the first and third maybe as a result. And in front, bookies made Elliott to championship here, and Willie Mullins won by 100,000 or something. You know, he won pulling up in the end. So Gordon has to be so far in front of Willie going into a Punchestown Festival, because you know that the depth that Willie Mullins is going to have there, that it's very, very difficult to see how he's going to do that.
Can I ask you for a trainer that's going to have a standout season? This is a bit left field. If anybody's got one, Chris Gordon was one last year who took a massive step forward with some excellent horses. Does anybody think there's a slightly under the radar trainer that they want to flag up? Anyone?
Just a couple. I generally like following stables who were a bit out of form last year. So Neil King would be one of those, as I mentioned, with Look Away. Like he has some useful horses that will probably prove to be very well handicapped. Kim Bailey's another. I think as Charlie mentioned with Salt Rock, like his yard went through a very tough time for a lot of last season. They've still got a lot of smart horses who underperformed, who might be underestimated. And one who's picked up a few spares from other trainers at sales is, I think, James Owen. He seems to be improving horses from yards who aren't traditionally improved from. So he's one. I think he'll be underestimated. His horses will be underestimated because they've been sold by the likes of Dan Skelton, and people will just think that they're aggressive. But he seems to be doing surprisingly well and has a lot of training experience. So those are 3 that come to mind.
Charlie, you were nodding.
Yeah, the James Owen one I think is very interesting. He runs a massive pre-training operation for a lot of the flat yards in Newmarket as well, and has trained on the Arab circuit and point-to-pointers, and he's done really well over the summer. I mean, there was a horse, and Dan would know that from Philip Hobbs and Paul Webber especially, that was sort of heavily well supported on their first runs for the yard and didn't miss. So James Owen, I think, is a very interesting one with recruits from other yards, 100%.
I think Gavin Cromwell could have a good season this year. He just seems to have a good, solid team. He's 4th now behind Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott, and Henry Bromhead in the championship. He didn't have a Cheltenham Festival winner last year, but I think his horses can be underrated, but he's a very, very good trainer, and he just seems to have a good clutch of young horses this season.
Just want to chop one out there, Tom, as well. I was wondered for Dan or even Don, how far away is Dan Skelton from mounting a challenge?
Oh, I think the way he's training now compared to a few seasons ago, he's going to get closer as the quality increases. Because I think, like the likes of Etalon, as we mentioned, Charlie, the likes of Lotus Third, they're not being overly hard pressed in like their first season or second season with the yard. So they're giving them time to continue to be decent money earners for years to come. They're still getting good ammunition to the yard. But unfortunately, I think Paul Nicholls this year probably has maybe one of the strongest teams he's had in terms of quality, in terms of young horses, from novice hurdles, from bumpers, unraced horses from France. So I think it's not going to be this year. But I mean, if Dan can get more ammunition to the yard and continue with some of these young horses from this season, if they can get to a level and stay there for a few seasons, he's not a million miles away, but it might still be a few years before he's really mounting a strong challenge.
Final question is, will El Fabiolo rate a better horse than the dual champion chase winner Energumen at the end of the season? To everyone. Don.
I'd say so, yeah. I'd say so. Like, he's the coming force, isn't he? And look, Energumen, he sets a high standard. I think he's got £5 or £6 to find on him on official ratings, but Energumen is going to be 10 next March. And like, it can be done. Sprinter Soccer won the champion chase as a 10-year-olds. Special Tiara won it as a 10-year-old, so it can be done. But El Fabiolo, like, and I think there's even room for improvement in his jumping. If he can, like, jump even a wee bit more slickly than he does, he can improve again. So yeah, like I'd say he could pass him out. I'd say maybe even earlier in the season than next March.
Anyone else?
I was just going to say that Don could El Fabiolo beat Energumene earlier in the season, then Energumene beat him back at Cheltenham.
I hadn't considered that. Yeah. If we got a soft ground champion chase again, maybe.
El Fabiolo all the way.
There you go. Energumene, the market leader in that race, has run an absolute stinker. 2 years on the bounce. Shishkin, then Edwardstone. So there you go.
That race has been cursed for years. We have big clash bigged up for the last 3 or 4 years, and it always ends up either in a bog or the hot favourite just doesn't run a race. Like, it's just, if we can get there and they're both in good form, that'll do me. That would be a result in my book.
Trevor says El Fab is the business. That's us done. I hope you've enjoyed it all, and make a note of all those horses. There will be an insights column up for you after this with all the horses that we put up, and we'll be back again next Tuesday to do the very same with 3 new guests. We're also back on Friday for a podcast looking at the weekend's action. Charlie Poste, Dan Overall, Donn McClean, thank you very much. Thanks to those of you at home for listening, and we'll chat to you on Friday. Bye-bye.